With the Bessey clamps, if you just put a worktop together and you've clamped it up and you want to get another clamp lengthways, instead of clamping this way up and not being able to move the handle because it's right next to the workbench, you can actually clamp this way up and use the bottom of the clamps to clamp in the opposite direction. So you can use the bottom of the clamp to clamp as well as the top of the clamps to clamp. You'll have to excuse the rain if it's coming over on the microphone. It's absolutely lashing it down out there. With this end of the clamp, you have a stop end on it which just gets pulled straight off. And then you can pull the clamp off and turn it the opposite way around, and now that means that you can actually use the clamp to pressurize wood the opposite direction. So if you had a dry fit and it wasn't coming apart, you could then put the clamps in and squeeze the dry fit apart without having to use a hammer. The spacer feet, which keep your work surface from being marred by the metal, just pull off the surface and then you can turn them around and put them the other way up. The clamps themselves sit nice and squarely on the workbench, and they have a couple of spaces underneath that the work actually sits on. So these are the blocks, and they have a shallow slot which is for the top one, and then they have a longer slot that the lower one sits underneath. They also have two screw holes so you can screw them permanently down onto a fixture, and the base also has two screw holes that again you can either screw the base down only or you can screw straight through the whole unit. With the feet taken off of the block is exactly the right height so that the clamps still sit on the surface of your worktop. You then just position the top rail on top of it and it goes into the shorter slots, and you can still move them backwards and forwards. So the blocks have slots in them, and the bottom clamp goes in the slot that goes all the way to the ground, and the clamp that goes across the top goes into the clamp with slots only going halfway down. And that way the whole frame stays together without you having to struggle with your clamps. And then you can just put your piece of work in and then clamp it up. If you're using the Bessey clamps that don't have the adjustable ends so that you can move it along the rail, the square blocks actually come with feet that can get screwed down onto a work surface for a permanent fixture, but they also clamp together, and if you put two together you can actually put it underneath the bottom foot, which then lifts it up to the same height, and your rails stay perfectly level without any strain on them. That's a nice little touch. And also if you were storing the feet, you can store all four together so you don't lose them. Another nice feature that the Bessey clamps have, if you've got arthritis like I'm starting to get in my hands and you can't clamp as hard as you want to, it takes a 6mm Allen key on the end of it, and then you can tighten it up using the 6mm Allen key. I know the Bessey clamps are expensive, but for the quality of clamp that you're getting, I think they're worth the price. It's just the small details that have been refined over time that make these clamps really nice. So if I bring the camera in, the small details I'm talking about are things like having a 6mm Allen key head on the end of it so that you can tighten it up using an Allen key. Having the feet underneath so that your wood doesn't get marred by the metalwork. It sits happily on the workbench, and then at the other end you have a nice foot that keeps it horizontal. They also do an add-on so you can actually join two of these rails together, and having the 1 meter rails that I have means that I can do a 2 meter clamp up if I got the adapter, which would join into this hole and then into the hole of the next one. Well, I hope my take on the Bessey clamps has been useful for someone, and this is the K-body version. It's the KRE, which is non-adjustable at this end. They also do one where you can actually push a button down and adjust that end as well, so that you're clamping in the middle of the bar. Thank you for watching.